Steve, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
I mean, we have seen somewhat of a turnaround in the platinum industry with many companies that used to report losses now coming into profits. I mean, this turnaround seems to have affected yourselves as well, because now you've announced that the time is now prudent for you to embark on your rights issue. So just take us through some of the things that you are seeing on the ground, and particularly why the timing now is so perfect for RB Plat to continue on its previously announced rights issue.
Thanks, Vivi. You remember that in 2017 or so, we acquired Maseve, which was a subsidiary of PTM Platinum Group Metals, for a sum of around 700 million rands. And the intention was, and we got shareholder approval to raise capital in order to pay for that acquisition. But at the time, the market was poor, and we decided that we should not destroy shareholder value by raising capital during low market conditions. And we used internal cash reserves, including the facilities that we had to pay fully for that acquisition, and postpone the capital raise, because at the time we did not need that capital and the facilities that we were having. We would need it later when we continue ramping up and actually developing Styldrift further. So we postponed that. As a result, our balance sheet now got under pressure in the process. And remember that we had access to the bank facilities on condition that we would raise capital and replace that money that we used, because it was not meant to pay for Maseve, but it was meant to capitalize Styldrift. So, and the time came where we ramped up Styldrift. We used a lot of capital. Remember, if you look at our results, we used around 3.4 billion rands last year in CapEx. And therefore, in order to bring some semblance of stability and normality to our balance sheet, and the market lending itself to that environment, and metal price, basket price, revenue basket price improving, and there is appetite for equities and appetite for PGMs, and I use the word PGMs deliberately, not platinum. We felt that the time is opportune now to raise that capital in order to stabilize ourselves.
Right.
But we still are now, remember that we were ramping up to 150,000 tons per month, mainly because we did not have concentrating capacity. Now that we acquired Maseve and there's concentrating capacity, and we have got to upgrade that plant and build a conveyor belt from Styldrift to Maseve plant, and we're ramping up now to 230, because the absence of concentrating capacity was the only bottleneck why we could not go to 230. Now that that bottleneck has been removed, we're raising a little bit more in order to ramp up fully to the full capacity of Styldrift mine.
Right. Richard?
I mean, you know, certainly together with a number of the other mining companies out there, capital allocation has been done prudently and in a manner that is actually value enhancing. You know, my only concern, and we spoke about this off air, was the fact that, you know, obviously PGM basket is looking good. Certainly your reputation with your unions is looking good. You know, fatality free, or mostly. The only real concern really, or actually one of the provisions really, is a weakening currency, which has also offset some of your production decrease. But the big elephant in the room, which we spoke about off air, is Eskom. Now, how are your prospective shareholders from the rights issue looking at that with the opportunity offset in terms of what RB Platinum really presents itself as?
It's a problem. I mean, I would not lie and say that there is no problem, you know, affecting the industry as a whole, you know, from the Eskom side of things. But we're slightly better because our mines are relatively shallow, with BRPM mines at 500 meters deep and Styldrift at 750 meters deep. So there is no refrigeration in our mines, and therefore we do not need enormous amount of power to refrigerate the shafts. We only need ventilation. We have got standby generator to exit the employees in the event of total failure of power, and therefore there is no risk to safety. I mean, there's no safety risk to the employees because of power failure. Where it would affect production is when there is total power cut. completely. But if it's in drip drops and for 2 hours there, 4 hours there, we manage to play around with that. But the mine will continue running. We will continue hoisting, and we will only stop parts of the plant. And then when the power comes back again, we are allowed to use back. And it has been around 20%. Then we can say you can stop the mill or you can stop the float. So we managed to play around with that. It will affect the concentrate, but it's easy to recover from that.
Right. And I mean, Steve, Richard spoke about a relative good relationship with your unions there, but of course we did hear last week that the platinum mining sector managed at the final hour to stop AMCU from extending its strike from the gold sector into the platinum sector. I mean, what are the risks there for you should AMCU get its way in court?
Well, we were not part of the notice for secondary strike. So it was our neighbors, other of our neighbors. So we were not part of that, and therefore we are not part of the application for an interdict in court. But you cannot say that you are immune from that kind of things. If it happens to your neighbor, say Impala Platinum, it could spill over to us. So there is always that likelihood. But so far the risk is minimal.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, with all the Eskom noise, it's likely that our currency is going to continue to depreciate if it starts affecting credit ratings and consumer and investor confidence further. You know, certainly that, for one, is a good thing for the likes of yourselves. You know, all of a sudden we've seen a non-correlation of, you know, precious metals and metals in general vis-a-vis the currency. So, you know, good metal prices has generally seen the rand on a strengthening bias. We've seen a weakening bias, which I suppose is not bad for the likes of yourselves operating in rands. I'd just like to understand, so that's a positive. I'd just like to understand, you know, how the ramp up in production is likely to be affected, you know, with Eskom, again, given that it's a sizable increase in production numbers of PGM basket metals from previous years.
You mean Eskom in terms of power cuts or in terms of pricing?
No, power cuts.
And pricing, because I mean this month we are waiting for NERSA's decision on what tariff.
Definitely on pricing, it will increase our cost of utilities, and we are all worried. I mean it's quite high. It will erode, you know, the margins. No one wants to operate at the high cost, be it labor, be it utilities. But as I said earlier on power cuts, unless it is complete blackout, we're not overly worried because we are not a deep mine itself, unless it is complete blackout, in which event that will affect us. More so that we are a mechanized mine. So yeah, we are worried anyway. You don't want a situation where there is uncertainty on power supply, because it can impact on many things, which include investor confidence, because investors don't invest in an industry which is reliant on something which is of lesser supply. And power is one major thing, not only for the mining industry, but for the overall economy of the country.
Right.